Hello and welcome to your one-stop spot for all things NFL Draft, NFL, and college football. Michael Rochman here, joined by my co-host Nick Durst, and we're here to bring you a lot of talk about this past weekend of football, about the past month of football, about really everything that you could want to discuss. If you are tuning in, be sure to leave some comments, leave some questions, and we will discuss anything regarding the NFL, college football, NFL draft. But first and foremost, before we dive into everything that we have for today. Nick, how's it going?
Michael, it's going well for me. Not for my football team. Absolute disaster in the New York Giants. But we're getting towards we're getting to the home stretch here in the NFL, and huge game tonight. Huge game tonight for the first seed in the AFC, as the Ravens went for 2 yesterday and did not make that. What do you think? How do you think this one's going to play out this evening?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I'm hoping for the Patriots to win. Clear out in the open. I'm a big Patriots fan, and I think that the team has built a ton of momentum. When it comes to the Patriots, I feel like I'm rather unbiased when it comes to assessing how they're doing. I've maybe even been a little bit underestimating what they're capable of. But now, I'm bought in, and I hope tonight, if this defense can really kind of make this passing game uncomfortable, cause Josh Allen to force some turnovers. We saw it in that Saints game where Josh Allen had a phenomenal stat line, but there were a lot of turnovers that if the Saints offense had gotten going, the Saints would have won that game. Now, the Patriots obviously have their offensive issues as well, but if they can force those similar issues, get some red zone stops, then the Bills are very beatable, and the Patriots have the makings of a team that could very well come away with this one. We'll see what happens, though. Obviously, you can't discount what the Bills have been able to do over these past couple of years.
Yeah, I think because this game's in Buffalo, I'm going to give the Bills the slight edge. I think the home field advantage will play a huge factor in these two games. They're playing again in 2 weeks, right? So I think I'll give the Bills this one, but I think this is probably going to come down to week 18 of the overall season. 17 games overall, and that's going to determine who is going to make the playoffs as the division winner, which is going to be huge because the loser, they're going to have to end up playing perhaps the Chiefs in the second round. So I think they're going to want to avoid that. Chiefs, I think, are going to coast to the division now. The Chargers, maybe they'll give them a little bit of fight. But yeah, I think yesterday was pretty telling in the NFL about a lot of things, which is one, I think if Kyler Murray didn't get hurt, he would have won MVP. Comes off the injured list, two throwing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, absolutely incredible. And the other thing that really makes you think is, can you really pick against the Buccaneers in the playoffs? They're off to a franchise best start. And Gronkowski is having one of his best years in a long time. Brown's not even playing right now. He's another threat they're going to get back. And they took care of business. I know the Falcons are horrible, but I think the Buccaneers are just firing all cylinders here as we march towards the playoffs.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of underestimate the team because they've had their struggles, but they had way bigger struggles last year. I think this is a team that kind of knows, like, hey, mid-season, we don't want to lose the momentum that we have, but we also don't want to oversell ourselves right now. And that's not saying they're going into games saying, okay, it's fine if we lose right now. But it's just, I think that they are playing a bit conservative, trying to kind of keep things open-minded with the playbook, really kind of working on things rather than selling out for winning and just being this dominant team that is fully functional, I guess. And, saving up your guys, keeping them rested is huge for February. I mean, we've seen a number of teams that they have a great season and they get to the postseason and the team's just worn out. We saw it with the undefeated Patriots. You go 16-0, you get through that playoff, and then you meet up in the Super Bowl with the dominant front seven against Giants, and some terrible things happen, that's for sure. But, I think for the Bucs, it's something where they know that they have the talent that's going to get them to playoffs, and now it's about if you can convert that playoff appearance into a Super Bowl. Now, does that mean that they're taking games off? No, but at the same time, I think they're a little bit more open-minded in terms of training and just the overall game plan to kind of incorporate things that will hopefully benefit them later down the road more so than right away.
Absolutely. The Rams, they needed to get right games, so they just destroyed the Jaguars by 30. Stafford looked better, but again, not much pressure on him. Chargers, as I just mentioned, maybe they got a shot to win the West. They took care of business, pummeling the Bengals. The Colts won 31-0 over the Texans. Dolphins won 2019. So it's getting crowded with the AFC wild card. Browns were idle, but of course they had a really bad loss last week to the Ravens. Steelers won. Chiefs beat the Broncos. So with the AFC, it's really hard to see how this is going to play out. I think we know the Bills and Patriots are going to be in. We know the Chiefs are going to be in. We know that the Titans are going to make the playoffs. We know that everything else is kind of up for grab in the sense. Of course, it's just very fluid at this point. But with the seven teams now, and the Ravens are going to get in, of course, as well. With the 7 teams now, the extra game, you got to wonder what the minimum amount of wins is going to be to get you in there. Is it going to be 9-8, or is it going to be 10-7?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this AFC picture, it's like you just want to give that 7th spot in the NFC to another AFC team because it's ridiculous. I mean, right now there are 13 teams in the AFC, all that could possibly be in that playoff picture. Miami, 6-7, is the lowest of that, and they're sitting at 6-7. Obviously, there's the Jets, the Texans, the Jaguars that aren't going to be in that playoff picture unless something unexplainable happens. But there are a lot of good teams in the AFC. It's tough. Indianapolis is probably one of the hottest teams in football right now, and they're sitting on the outside of this playoff picture. There's a lot that's left to be done. No team can take weeks off. Games like the Raiders losing to the Washington football team are going to come back to haunt these teams. You can't lose these games where you're the better team, and right now it's just such a tight race that if I told you preseason that Cleveland was going to be in 11th place in the AFC, you'd probably laugh me off the stream. You'd talk to Chris Landry, say, look, something's wrong with Michael. We need someone new on the show. But that's the reality of the AFC. It is stacked right now in this conference. There's a lot of depth. Denver just got wiped by Kansas City, but they're still 6-6 on the city or on the season. I mean, there's plenty of talent in this conference, and there's still plenty of football left to play because there's no clarity right now on who's going to be in this playoff picture.
Yeah, we have 3 teams in the AFC that are in last place. So the Raiders and Broncos tied for last place, 6-6. The Browns are 6-6 and last in the North. And all 3 of those teams, if they were in the NFC, would be having the record right now for the 6th seed in the playoffs. So the AFC is clearly better from top to bottom. However, I think both of us would agree we'd be absolutely stunned if neither the Buccaneers, Packers, or Cardinals won the Super Bowl. I think those 3 teams are so much better than everybody else. And I'd be stunned if they weren't in the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. But what do you think about that statement that they're at a tier of their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we kind of seen is while this AFC is very balanced, there's not really a top dog. Even if the Patriots or Bills win tonight and they claim that number 1 seed, there's still a lot of question marks about who is really this top team. Now, Kansas City has turned it around very well lately. I know you, at the beginning of the season, were kind of anti-Kansas City in terms of just if you were bought into them or not. You were very much selling. Now they've won 5 in a row. Mahomes looks good as of late. The offense has kind of gotten going. The defense has actually held up their end of the bargain. It could very easily be Kansas City in what would probably be one of their sloppiest seasons of the Mahomes era. But I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas City now runs this through to, maybe losing one more game in this regular season, but ending up as a top seed and potentially ending up as the AFC representative again, despite maybe the early doubts, especially with how poorly they were playing against some of the better teams in the conference.
Well, Michael, the next 2 weeks are going to be big for the AFC West in general because you have Chiefs Raiders this week. Like we'll assume the Chiefs are going to win this weekend. The Chargers are taking on the Giants, so it should be a pretty easy win for the Chargers. And then in week 15, Chargers versus the Chiefs. So that could be an absolutely tremendous big time implication matchup for the playoffs there between those two teams.
Yeah, and I mean, you look around at what the AFC West has brought this year, and again, it's just a very talented division. Even with the slip-ups of a Las Vegas Raiders team that lost to Washington, even with Denver kind of getting blown out, I guess, by the Chiefs last night, there's still plenty of talent to where you can't sleep on any of these teams in any of these games. And, the Chargers, yes, they've had their mishaps where they've kind of gone into games and just gotten demolished, really. But they also just went and really laid it on to the Cincinnati Bengals, and that's a very impressive win. There's some question marks surrounding the Chargers, especially in terms of the run defense, especially in terms of opening up this offense for Justin Herbert. But, it's still very talented on paper. I think they're about equal with the Chiefs. And, if the Chargers continue this momentum, continue playing offensively how they played against Steelers, how they played against Cincinnati, then I wouldn't be surprised if they go into Kansas City and pull off an upset and then sweep the season.
Certainly. And on the NFC side of things, listen, the Vikings, it was theirs for the taking for the wild card, but brutal loss to the Lions. They've lost 2 straight now. They got the best quarterback, I think, of the teams vying for the wild card spot. But at 5-7, I don't think they're going to get in. I think we know the Rams are going to get the wild card. It's looking like the 49ers are going to get the wild card as well. And then it really comes down to, is it going to be the Washington football team or the Eagles? As crazy as it is to say, looks like those two are kind of in the driver's seat for the 7th spot in the NFC.
Yeah, there is plenty to watch when it comes to these teams. Also, just plenty of intrigue in this NFC division. I mean, our NFC conference. Washington has played some very good football as of late. We've kind of seen their defense get back to its reputation of being one of the stronger units in the NFL. Right now, Taylor Heineke, the quarterback, we could see Ryan Fitzpatrick back before the end of the season, and maybe that could also boost them up. But 4 wins in a row against pretty good teams. I mean, they beat the Bucs, they beat the Raiders, they beat the Seahawks, and I know that the Seahawks are down in this year right now, but they still are a Russell Wilson-led team, and I think a lot of people kind of expected once Russ came back, the Seahawks were going to go on a bit of a run, maybe claim that last playoff spot. Now, Washington kind of shut that down, and they've brought a lot of doubt into this Seattle team that really just went on and beat San Francisco. So there's plenty of intrigue when it comes to this conference. Really can't count out a lot of teams just yet because it's still very close. I mean, Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, Minnesota, Philly, San Fran, Washington, they're all kind of competing for those last few spots in the conference. But those 2 spots are wild card for a reason. They're up for grabs for anyone. And, Washington probably has the momentum, but I'd say Philadelphia looks good. Minnesota has the talent, but you can't lose to teams like Detroit. What are you doing? Mike Zimmer's lucky that, they have Thursday night football or else he might be out of the job. There is so much on the line for a lot of these teams. If Seattle doesn't turn it around, then what happens to Pete Carroll in the future? So lots to analyze with these final few weeks. And if I had to predict the 2, I'd probably say Philadelphia and Washington get in there.
You think Minshew should start again? I mean, he looked tremendous against the Jets, and the Jets are admitting, we didn't know he was going to play. We didn't game plan for him.
It's tough to say. I think that Hurts is a solid quarterback, but he's inconsistent right now. And that's been the biggest issue for Philadelphia. They kind of got the run game going to where you can have faith that Hurts is going to be able to come back and play. And, the offense will keep its momentum that they kind of had whenever he went out. But at the same time, there were too many weeks where the Eagles just came out flat. And that is not what you want at all out of your quarterback. Minshew came in. I think there is certainly some question marks surrounding Minshew because a lot of his passing was done inside the hashes. A lot of tight end targets, didn't get the ball really outside to his receivers. And that's something that's easy to kind of game plan for as the weeks continue on. But, if he proves himself in the time that you give him, if he does his job, then yeah, the opportunity certainly is there for Minshew to kind of claim the spot. I don't think Jalen Hurts was so dominant that he's unreplaceable as a starter. So if Gardner Minshew kind of comes back again and has a good performance, then I think Philadelphia has to have a real conversation about who's going to be the starter going forward, because you can't have that inconsistency that Hurts has kind of struggled with all season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That's for sure. It's going to be interesting to see that. To Hurts' former team, Oklahoma, Michael, they got their guy, they got their next head coach. What can you tell our viewers or listeners who were not familiar with what he was able to do as a coordinator about him?
Yeah, so you look at Oklahoma moving to the SEC, and I think that's why this move was made. Brent Venables established a very strong defense at Clemson, one that was capable of going against these SEC juggernauts once playoff time came. Now, for Oklahoma, this isn't just going to the playoff picture and having to match up with them once or twice. This Oklahoma team is now going to have to match up with the SEC week in, week out. Venables is going to be able to bring that to your program. He's going to bring in dominant defensive linemen, dominant corners, a scheme that has successfully added pressure to great offenses. They slowed down Tua Tagovailoa when he was on one of the best offenses in college football, and really that's going to be huge. He knows the foundation that's needed to make a national champion. He saw it with Dabo Swinney. He was a huge part in that, and now he's going to try to establish his own Oklahoma. I think there is a familiarity between the athletic director and Venables, which is also huge. That full trust, full transparency. Oklahoma's identity is going to change. This isn't going to be the Lincoln Riley passing offense that many have known in the past for Oklahoma. But at the same time, I think there's an argument to be made that the hire of Venables could position themselves better for an actual championship run than they ever had with Lincoln Riley, despite Lincoln Riley being as good of a college football coach as he is.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And their biggest rival, Texas, they're a bit of a mess. They're very close to the Longhorns right now. I think Sarkisian better hope that the move to the SEC comes later rather than sooner, because if he goes into the SEC right away, it's going to be tough for them next year or the year after.
Yeah, I think all the marbles right now are on what Texas does this offseason in terms of the signing day that's coming up in about 6 days. And then with the transfer portal, talk about Quinn Ewers, talk about other quarterbacks and guys. But there's a lot of potential here for Texas to kind of turn around a little bit. We saw it with Michigan State, how they were a team that was kind of in the dumps of the Big Ten when Mel Tucker first arrived. He hit the transfer portal hard, and they were contending for the conference. So is Texas going to turn this into a 11-1 team that goes into the SEC as a favorite? No, probably not. But I think there is plenty of potential to get things back on track, get back to that 8-4, 9-3, and then you can kind of build a foundation there, kind of continue to hopefully take those next steps, which is what Texas has been craving from their program for such a long time.
Why don't they go get Spencer Rattler? I mean, wouldn't that be a story?
I guess he's not allowed, hate it. I think Rattler has a lot of potential. The biggest issue for him in his game is he's selfish whenever it comes to making plays. He sees an easy check down throw and he'll pass it up for a 20-yard gain because he knows he has such a great arm. But the issue with that is you have to learn to kind of have that ability to accept that checkdowns are okay. The first down is great to pick up. I know you want to get the big highlight play. I know you want to see this guy. You see this guy open in your mind and you're saying, okay, I can hit that launch at 50 yards, but that's where you risk passes really kind of turning over or stalling drives if you miss. Yes, you have the arm talent to do it. You should have full freedom to do it, but at the same time, you have to know when to make the short throw. And, we saw that with Mahomes a little bit this year. He got a little bored, according to his offensive coordinator, and the offense had its issues because of it. So Rattler, not necessarily a Mahomes-level quarterback, but I think there is a lot of similar traits that can be learned from that where, you start to kind of embrace the short game a little bit because his arm is there. His mobility is there. It's just the discipline of playing quarterback that needs to be fixed.
Certainly.
We got a comment from Weege Monster 5000 VIP in the house. Welcome, Weege. We appreciate you on the stream. And, real quick before we dive into the college football NFL draft talk, Rochman's Rookies of the Week back at you after having to
Yes.
stall it to 1 month in December. Here is a chance to look at the Week 13 Rookies of the Week for, what was a very talented wideout week. But first we start out with Javonte Williams, 23 rushes, 102 yards, 6 receptions, 76 yards, and a reception touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs. If there was a bright spot for this Denver Broncos offense, it was Javonte Williams. And, also, shout out to this guy for saving me in fantasy. I am on the bubble when it comes to this playoff picture, and he was huge for me. Shout out Javonte Williams, a key piece of this Broncos offense going forward. Melvin Gordon is a fantastic back, and when they have both of them, it's great. But as long as Melvin Gordon's out, they're going to need Javonte to play a big role, and he already answered that role in week one, in the first week of having to deal with that. The next Rookie of the Week is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 10 receptions, 86 yards, and a game-winning touchdown to move the Detroit Lions from 0-10-1 to 1-10-1 playoff season in Detroit, championship caliber team. They beat Minnesota, which is a division rival, so absolutely huge victory for them. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the whole offseason was talking about how the Lions don't have weapons. Yeah, they still need to get some, but Amon-Ra St. Brown has really transcended into a nice slot option for this team. Kind of helps their need at the receiver spot. I think you can kind of afford to not completely overhaul the position. Still, you have some guys that you're going to need to really bring in when it comes to free agency or the draft. But Amon-Ra St. Brown putting together some strong performances, about to hit 50 receptions on the year. I think he's a very solid, underrated receiver. But this game-winning touchdown was his first touchdown of the season. So couldn't come at a better time. And the Lions from 0-10-1 to playing in February, baby. Let's go. Next up, we got Elijah Moore for the Jets. 6 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. And absolutely impressive performance. Again, another loss. Obviously, Philadelphia had their way with the Jets. But Zach Wilson needed to get going. He had a pretty solid game, 23 for 38. And it was big because of Elijah Moore. 6 receptions, 77 yards, 1 touchdown. Getting that connection going is what Jets fans need to see. And they absolutely saw it this past week. Jets, they have some potential. And Elijah Moore is going to play a big part in that potential being achieved. The next guy on this list is Jalen Waddle. And, apologies to Nick for any poor flashbacks of yesterday's game, but these two Dolphins are absolutely dominant. Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, both guys put together great games. 9 receptions for 90 yards for Waddle. Didn't end up putting in a touchdown or anything, but still very fantastic performance. Miami, similar for New York, where they kind of need Tua to get going. Tua has been very good these past few weeks, kind of getting going, and Waddle's a big piece in that. Very good receiver, very dominant when it comes to just overall speed and separation ability. Miami's got a good one. I like their receiving core. I think, Will Fuller still needs to get healthy and maybe come back. But right now, with Waddle and Parker, I think they're in promising motion. They've kind of turned into one of the hottest teams in football. They've won, I believe, 5 in a row now, even beating a team like the Baltimore Ravens. So plenty of potential. They play the Jets next week, so they could very easily turn that into 6. And, who knows? They could be a playoff team. And for Jalen Phillips, 3 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. Just another dominant performance for someone who is on my Rookies of the Month list. Jalen Phillips really establishing himself as a strong edge rusher in this class. 5 sacks in the past 2 games. Really getting hot at the right time, and Miami needs him.
Michael, this is your Super Bowl pick. So Dolphins, they get in with the wild card. We get 3 AFC East teams in the playoffs, and then Tua leads them all the way. Well, what have you thought of Tua this season? It's been very up and down.
Yeah, I mean, he came in and struggled early, and I think that was one of the big issues, but I think they've sort of embraced his skill set. He's a great RPO passer. He has some of the quicker hips when it comes to getting set up and delivering the ball quickly, and I think that is huge for him. He's played pretty well in these past few games, and I think that's absolutely critical for a young QB. We've talked about it probably week in, week out. about how important confidence is in terms of getting that QB to take those next steps in development. And these past few weeks, he's done that. He really kind of had a mediocre game against Baltimore. He did his job, but it was only like 8 for 13 or whatever. But then these past 3 weeks, he's kind of been relied on for 30 passes in the past 3 games at least. And, he's really kind of answered that call. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception in the past 3 games, completing a high number of his passes. I think he completed 73% of passes in this past game, and he had 8 in the 80 percentile for against Carolina and New York. So he's done his job. He's keeping it simple. I think Miami is a team that needs to get a running back in there. I don't really love their current rushing attack, but if they get like a Melvin Gordon in this offense, then I think Miami is really going to take major strides. And, fixing up this offensive line is big, so you can kind of have further developing plays. But Miami is certainly beating teams that they need to beat. That's a big part of your schedule is you need to beat the teams that you're better than. And they've beaten the Texans, beaten the Jets, beaten the Panthers, beaten the Giants. And while, yes, these aren't necessarily the most impressive victories, it's still crucial that you win these games when they come up because, you look at some of these other teams like the Vikings losing to the Lions, and you look at those games and you're saying, man, that keeps us from playoffs. So Miami winning these games, they have 2 very winnable games against the Jets and then the Saints in these next 2 games. They have potential to potentially, be in that playoff spot. They have 2 tough games after that to where they'd be looking at 8-7 with games against Tennessee and New England. But, the possibility is there, and Miami could very well turn around their season after what was a very bleak 1-7 start.
Yeah, and at minimum here, Michael, Brian Flores saved his job.
Yeah, I think he absolutely has. Maybe he's still in the hot seat, Miami. I wouldn't be surprised if they say, look, next year we need playoffs or else we can't keep doing this. But Flores has definitely saved his job in my mind. They've done what they needed to do. They had a tough schedule. I mean, playing Bills, Raiders, Colts, Bucks 4 in a row, a lot of teams couldn't get through that with a single victory. So not easy, but definitely was a span that wasn't acceptable. And Flores has done a good job of kind of regaining the season, regaining the possibility of playoffs. And, Miami has a history of beating the Patriots in Miami, and that's that Week 17 matchup.
Yes.
Even if the Patriots are the best team in the AFC, don't sleep on Miami to potentially pull off that upset yet again.
They've done it before, so who's to say that they wouldn't do it again? You're absolutely right there. No doubt about it.
And, moving on from these rookies of the week, there is some guys that have been playing phenomenal football that could end up on these rookies of the week next year.
Yes.
Let's talk about them. Quarter 3 risers for the draft class. Day 3, we're talking about Bailey Zapp, quarterback out of Western Kentucky, really setting all sorts of records when it comes to FBS passing production. He is a dominant quarterback for Western Kentucky. I think he was always kind of in this discussion of being a day 3 type QB, but he's definitely rising up boards with his consistent play. These bowl games are huge for quarterbacks. They want to see him against matchups where, they aren't used to playing against these conference teams that kind of mesh together. You look at the Big 12, and a lot of the teams are very similar. You look at the Pac-12, SEC, there's these certain kind of groups of teams. So whenever these bowl games come up, there's a certain aspect of unfamiliarity. And that's huge for analysis in the draft process. And Bailey Zapp has a huge test coming up for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. If he's able to kind of prove himself in that matchup, if he's really kind of able to showcase what he can do against a team that he hasn't been able to really play against or like kind of be prepared for in Appalachian State, then there's plenty of potential for him to maybe move up into that next section of day 2. So plenty of potential here for Bailey Zapp. Keep an eye on. In the day 2 talk, we're talking about Chris Owens, guy who was really a center for a lot of his career, got some right tackle work against Georgia, really a dominant showcase in that Georgia game. The Alabama offense was really able to have their way with this defense. Owens is a big part of that. Versatility is huge when it comes to the offensive line. A lot of teams are willing to invest early in a guy that's going to at least provide them depth on the offensive line. And Owens showing center and tackle versatility means he can play all 5 spots on the offensive line. Owens had a great performance. The second Alabama guy on this list. Definitely a dominant performance for Owens, one that kind of gets under-recognized because it's an offensive lineman. But if you have the chance to check it out, go check out that Georgia-Alabama game and keep an eye on 79 because he was very impressive. And, one that was easy to notice in this game was the wide receiver for Alabama, Jameson Williams, an absolute stud matchup in this game. 7 receptions, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. Look, this is a class at wide receiver where there might be size and there might be polished guys, but there's not a lot of speed. But when you have a guy who's 6'2", 190 pounds, running probably in the 4.3s as a receiver, he is going to fly up towards. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's a top 15 pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first wide receiver off the board just because that's how valued speed is, and he has the size to go along with it. He transferred from Ohio State because he couldn't break into that lineup with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's lower than Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson. Personally, he's my wide receiver 3 right now behind guys like Garrett Wilson and George Pickens. Treylon Burks also very much in that conversation. It's really a toss-up between Williams and Burks for who's number 3, actually. But Jameson Williams is getting a lot of love, getting a lot of attention in the NFL circles. And, keep an eye on this guy because he is an absolute stud. And in a class that's really kind of deprived of speed, a guy that's 6'2" and offers this type of speed is going to be coveted by NFL teams. And in the top 15, Devon Lloyd, absolute stud of a linebacker, really shut down Oregon in all aspects, had the pick 6, had just an absolute superstar performance. Devon Lloyd's a stud, and, this was a class that kind of needed a top guy at the linebacker position, and I think Lloyd has firmly established himself. 7 tackles in the game against Oregon, was all over the field. He has the athleticism, the speed, and just the build that you would want to really be confident in taking this guy, 6'3", 235, maybe a little smaller in your mind, but really that's kind of what the NFL is trending towards, is more athletic than bigger guys. And Devon Lloyd can play all aspects. He stops to run well. He's good in coverage. I think he was a former safety, and he's put on weight, but still not really lost much of the athleticism that comes along with it. There's still some processing that needs developed, but in terms of traits, Devon Lloyd is an absolute stud, and I think he's someone that's going to go top 15 in this class.
So, Michael, do you think here that Utah's performance at Oregon helps Lloyd at all?
Oh, absolutely. And he played a major factor in both games where Utah was able to kind of have their way with Oregon both times. You look at that 38-7 game, Devon Lloyd was all over the field, making 6 tackles, had a tackle for loss, and his presence is noted. It's avoided by other teams. So he's an absolute stud. He's doing everything he can to help this Utah team. If Cameron Rising was the quarterback for Utah all season, I think this is a playoff team. I think we're looking at them as that number 4 seed over Cincinnati, whether it's deserved or not. You can argue it, but I think Utah would have finished the season 11-1. I think they would have probably slipped up to that Oregon State team still because that's the game that Cameron Rising was still starting. But I think they beat BYU. I think they definitely beat San Diego State. And we're looking at Utah as the Pac-12 champion at 11-1. But, right now with players like Devon Lloyd, with players like Cameron Rising, players like Tavion Thomas, this team is stacked. But Devon Lloyd is the superstar who stands out. And that's impressive for a defender to be the guy that kind of stands out from a team. But Devon Lloyd does it, and he does it at a high rate. And now the NFL has taken plenty of notice on this guy. And I really do think that in terms of just solidified performances, he is one of them.
So I want to ask you about Bailey Zapp because leading the country in yards and touchdowns, obviously at a very small school. So what does this guy have to do either in his pro day or at the combine in order to be taken a little bit more seriously?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of solid intrigue about him already, but the big thing is tools. this guy's never going to be your fastest guy on tape or whatever. He's never going to wow you with his mobility. But I think there is plenty of potential in terms of just continuing to make the right reads, kind of showcase that he's not necessarily just a scheme type guy. He did this against Texas Tech at Houston Baptist that really kind of put him on the map and brought him up to the FBS level. And I think there's just questions about, can you kind of grow in the physical aspect of it, because he doesn't have the most arm talent. He's a good downfield passer. He has nice touch. But in terms of just velocity on his passes, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think going to the combine, going to pro days, and just showcasing an improved arm, better zip on his passes, that'll give a lot of confidence that he can continue growing his arm talent and potentially become something more than just a depth quarterback pick.
Interesting.
Sorry, by the way, for the sniffles. I'm dealing with a lot of allergies right now.
No worries. Yeah, I think he's interesting, and especially a year where there's no clear cut top 5 quarterbacks like we usually have. Could be a year for him where he could potentially rise again.
Absolutely. There's plenty of potential for anyone in this class to really work their way up or down with just the varying opinions on everyone that exists in it. So for a guy like Bailey Zapp, when you're leading FBS, you can kind of make that argument, why not me? And I'm sure there's going to be teams out there that are saying, look, this isn't just some guy that's in a pass-happy offense. He's a stud, and if he can kind of take that and continue to build on it, then we could very easily see him put together a nice career that maybe surprises some people.
No doubt about that. Well, Michael, of course, getting to the end here, but we got to talk about the college football playoff, naturally. So, we were texting over the weekend. I think the way the games played out is basically what we're going to see. I would just have the seating differently, but it doesn't really matter at this point. But I would have had Michigan 1. They won as well. They should have moved up. Alabama moved up to 2. That would have made sense. I would love to see Georgia and Alabama play again, but I would have went Michigan, Alabama, Cincinnati, and Georgia in the rankings. They did the opposite way. So, but it's same matchups here. So how do you see this shaking out? Is there anything that you think would deny Alabama from easily winning the championship? Kirby Smart, he's never been able to beat Alabama, and that happened once again in the game. And Alabama put on quite a beating, and now looks like they're going to be favored to win the national championship. I personally would take Michigan at this point, but I know everybody else is going to say Alabama is the better team.
Yeah, I think Alabama's the clear favorite at the moment, but we've seen a team go in as the clear favorite plenty of times and then blow it when it comes to the playoff process, really. And I think Georgia is still very much in it. I maybe don't trust Stetson Bennett to be the quarterback to do that, but I think that's the intrigue when it comes to both Georgia and Michigan, is their backup quarterback offers plenty of intrigue as a QB that could potentially change things up, shake up what the Alabama team or whoever makes it to that championship. No disrespect to Cincinnati, I guess they still have a chance for who they're expecting to play. So yes, you probably go into this quarterfinal matchup with Cade McNamara starting, with Stetson Bennett starting. But if things go south for either team, I think you got to look at the backup quarterback and say, we need you, because JT Daniels, yes, he's dealing with his injuries. He's trying to rest up his back, but you may not get a better opportunity than this season to win if you're Georgia. Michigan, yes, J.J. McCarthy is a young freshman and is the future of the program more so than the current, but with the arm talent, mobility, and just overall surprise factor that he can kind of bring to your offense, you need to make that switch if you kind of see your team struggling. And, the argument against McCarthy is probably that he's this young freshman, but so is Trevor Lawrence. And, they were still able to make that switch early in the season. And I'm not saying that McCarthy's going to be a Lawrence-level player, but I think that aspect of unknown that comes with a QB that has the tools that McCarthy does, you can absolutely shock them. And yes, with the defense, with the Jobo, with Hutchinson, you're going to create some havoc on defense. You need that offense to match with it.
So you're predicting a Tua situation, but with Michigan.
Absolutely, I think so. I think you need to because it's been a common factor of a lot of these championship runs where these young freshman QBs are able to do it. And I don't think that you have to rely on them to lead your team, but I think the change up and ability to open the offense is huge.
Do you think a lot of it, or some of it, has to do with the fact that there's no tape on these guys and they're not necessarily preparing for them going into the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cade McNamara is a good college football quarterback, but when it comes to going against these defenses like Georgia or like Alabama, he's going to have his issues because he's not going to open the field up with his arm. McCarthy can send the ball deep. So if you're putting in this new QB, your Georgia team or Alabama, whoever ends up facing this team, or if this change were to happen, you're really kind of having to readjust your entire defensive scheme, undo all the prep work that you've done all week, and go back to what you know. And yes, sometimes that can benefit, but at the same time, if you're not preparing for 2-3 weeks on these guys, then changing it up last second in the game can really throw everything off even worse.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So I'm guessing you're thinking we're getting the Georgia-Alabama rematch for the championship?
Right now, I lean Georgia-Alabama. I think Georgia would probably be my pick to win it still. I know Alabama had their way with them in the SEC championship, but I think that there's still a lot left for this Georgia team. And I think that the defense is still very strong. I know that they lost and let Alabama hang, I don't even know, I think it was 44 points on them. So there's plenty of reason to think that Georgia's not going to come into this and win. But I still believe in Georgia, and I think that there's plenty of potential here for them to kind of turn things around if a rematch were to happen.
All right, and lastly, Michael, what are we going to see from Cincinnati here? Are they going to have a Notre Dame-like performance in the college football playoff and lose by 30-plus?
Probably. I hate to say it because I've been big on giving the G5 a chance, but Cincinnati's probably going to struggle in this one. It's not going to be pretty. I think there's a chance that it could be held close. You know, maybe Desmond Ridder gets going a little bit. They put up some points. But if I had to put up a score prediction, I'd probably say 41-17 Alabama.
All right. I hope you're wrong. I really want to see Cincinnati win.
I hope I'm wrong, too.
And I want to see Cincinnati, Michigan. Now, do you think that these games will end before the clock strikes midnight on the East Coast?
Oh, that's tough.
You'll be spending your new year watching football.
I'm gonna say yes. What's the second start time? 6:30. Yeah, so it should be good.
6:30. I thought it was starting at 8:30. Wow. All right.
Yeah. So I mean 7:30 Eastern. I would assume. So it'll be close. It'll be running in through some of these parties that are going to be going on, but I'm going to say it'll be done by about 10:30, 11 o'clock. So you still got an hour to get out and go do some stuff.
There you go. It's interesting. And then the college football championship game will probably be at least 4.5 hours, which I can't stand it. I know you probably love it, but to me, it's too long.
I think that's a fair take. That one starts at 8, so that one will probably run a little late as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think hitting that 12 o'clock is very feasible for the national championship.
I think they should do the Manning cast for the championship.
I think they'd get a lot of viewers for that. That's for sure. I think a lot of people would love that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. I guess they could still very easily do it. So maybe
if they start promoting it, maybe they start promoting it on Monday Night Football tonight. Will you be watching the Manning cast tonight or the traditional broadcast?
I haven't watched the Manning cast yet all season, but I've heard a lot about it, like in terms of intrigue. So I think I'm going to try and check it out tonight.
Here's what I'll say. It's good to watch when you don't have a vested interest in the game. I tried watching it like when the Giants were playing, and I couldn't because I was like, I need to be more focused because they're not talking about every play. Like maybe they'll miss some replay or something. I would say check it out, but I think you'll ultimately be like, I got to watch the regular game here.
Maybe it'll be a next Monday thing where I'm not as tied to the performance that's at hand. With this one tonight, I'll probably be sweating the entire game. But next week I think it's Rams Cardinals. It'll be a good game, but also I'm not as invested to either team compared to the Patriots.
There you go. All right. Well, good luck.
All right.
Good luck to you, Michael, tonight, and good luck to your team.
Absolutely. And we appreciate everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate the comments, especially from our VIP, Mr. Weege Monster 5000. Also nice to see Ricklington in the comments. I didn't see the comment notification, so sorry for missing them. But Elijah Moore is definitely interested. Corey Davis, I think he's going to be a stud once this offense kind of gets going as the years kind of go on. But it's something that early on is going to be an issue. And, yeah, AFC East is definitely crowded, especially if the Jets kind of do turn things around. And I do like Saleh as a head coach, so I think they could. Next year is going to be very tight, even though right now maybe the Jets are bottoming out. I think this next year's division is going to be a close race. But, again, that's all we have for you here on Destination Draft Day. We appreciate everyone tuning in, everyone in the comment section, and everyone who checks us out on YouTube or on Twitch in the future. So thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you guys on Friday. Have a good one.